Okay, I think we're live. And there's Julian with his dramatic entrance. Nice. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Dan. I'm the news editor here at Canary Media. And we're so happy to be having our first ever exclusive official donor webinar. So thanks obviously for being here and giving us your time now, but also thanks because if you're here, it means that you've donated to our small but mighty nonprofit newsroom in the past. And for that, we are extremely grateful. As a nonprofit, every dollar counts and goes a long way toward helping us continue our mission of covering the clean energy transition. So yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. I am joined here today by many of our excellent reporters whose names you all no doubt know from reading our coverage. And I also just wanted to shout out before we get into it that this is a big week for us. Aside from this webinar, we officially merged with the Energy News Network at the beginning of this week. And hopefully you've noticed the snazzy new newsletter designs and the great regional newsletter offerings that we have now by way of ENN, as well as more stories and more names, many of whom are probably familiar reporters to all of you, but expect, more of the same good stuff. And we're all really pumped about it internally and hope that you're all loving the new direction and new stories and new designs and all that good stuff as well. Great. So one other housekeeping thing before I let the reporters here just introduce themselves and then we'll get into it. If you have questions throughout the webinar, there should be a panel on the right-hand side of your screen that says Q&A. I can see the Q&A panel, so if you want us to address something, go ahead and type your question in there. There's an upvote function, so you can kind of support each other, strategically downvote each other if you want to get your question up higher, but I recommend being nice. And yeah, I think that about covers the housekeeping. I will pass it off to our folks to introduce themselves. Maria, you're kind of at the top of my screen, so why don't you go ahead and say hi, say what you cover, and where you're calling in from.
Yeah, great. Well, yeah, thank you everybody for joining today, and of course for supporting Canary. I'm Maria Gallucci. I'm a senior reporter with Canary Media. I joined about 3 years ago, more than 3 years ago, and lately I've been focusing a lot on leading our coverage of heavy industry decarbonization. So, looking at how sectors like steel, cement, aluminum, even food and beverage manufacturing, what they're doing to reduce emissions, electrify, etc. And I also report a lot on sort of other emerging technologies like next generation geothermal, direct air capture, sustainable aviation fuel, sort of a grab bag of clean energy technologies. And I'm based in Brooklyn, New York, and originally from Ohio.
Nice. Allison, you're next up on my screen.
Hey everyone, I'm Allison Takamura. I am based in Golden, Colorado, which is just outside of Denver, and the air is thin here, so I sometimes still need to catch my breath. Let's see. So I'm staff writer, and I write the Electrified Life column, which I really love because I get to write about ways that we can electrify our homes and decarbonize our own lives and commutes. I also report on building decarbonization strategies. And one of the technologies that comes up a lot in both of these areas is heat pumps. So I love heat pumps.
Yes, official heat pump correspondent. Jeff, you're up next.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everybody. I'm Jeff St. John. I'm Director of News and Special Projects at Canary Media, which basically means roving reporter. I guess was a founding member of Canary. Joined about a week after my colleagues and I at Green Tech Media saw the end of that enterprise, which I joined in 2008. And as far as what I cover, it's a pretty wide range of stuff. A lot of grid policy. I was a smart grid guy for many years. More generally, kind of energy policy, transmission policy, renewable energy development, utility, kind of clean transition and integrated resource planning. really into distributed energy. Really enjoy writing about how EVs, solar panels, behind the meter batteries, responsive loads, smart thermostats, and the like can be tapped to help balance our grid in a time of increasing renewable energy penetration, increasing challenges to maintaining reliable electricity supply, and really interested in exploring why we can't get there from here problems that seem to crop up a lot when we talk about making the transition.
Cool. Claire.
Hey, my name's Claire. I'm the new reporter covering our new offshore wind beat, which is really exciting. When I saw the job opportunity to cover offshore wind full time, I knew there was something I wanted to do. I come from working at Politico and E&E News, where I covered renewables and renewables technology. But the ability to kind of go deep in this wind sector is really exciting, especially right now as it's facing considerable political headwinds, which we can discuss if anyone wants to. Just a little bit background about me. I grew up on the Jersey Shore. New Jersey is like a big battleground for offshore wind. So a lot of this hits close to home. And then for 12 years, I was actually an academic. I was an ocean scientist studying how climate change impacts ocean ecosystems. And kind of got frustrated that my writing was being read by no one but other scientists, and jumped into science journalism, and just really excited to be part of this growing news organization, and excited to talk with folks who have been our big supporters.
All right, Julian, take us home.
Hi, Julian Spector. I have also been here since the earliest days of Canary, and it's been wild to see. I think coming up on 4 years somehow, and way more faces in the mix, especially with all the really top-notch journalists from ENN joining. So great time, and that's all thanks to support from people like you. I've been covering the energy storage beat for most of my career, and that's gotten even more exciting lately in terms of both just huge numbers of deployment, batteries going into the grid all across the country, but especially Texas and California. And then, of course, we had a big fire at the biggest standalone grid battery just to start off this year. And then I've also been spending a lot of time on the domestic manufacturing storyline, which has really taken off in the last 2-3 years. Quite a lot of growth in like solar panels and battery production domestically, and creates all these new kind of economic opportunities for the clean energy transition to reach people that maybe wouldn't have had kind of a direct personal role in it otherwise. And then that's facing some uncertainty, to say the least, now. So yeah, glad to delve into all that.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so that is that's the lay of the land. I don't think I gave my own biographical details, but just for the sake of completing that, I'm in the Hudson Valley in New York, and I've been with Canary for about 2 years. All right, so I think the place that we can start is just talking a little bit about some of the storylines that all of you are the most focused on, and I'm going to say limit it to one, although there are obviously a million things that each of you are tracking across your beats. And, I think just give us a little bit of detail on, why that particular storyline is the thing that you're kind of focused on digging into at the moment. Yeah, who wants to start?
I would love to be the first person on this call to say that what the Trump administration is doing is what we are laser focused on right now. Obviously, we've all experienced the shock and awe, the uncertainty, the lack of communication, the challenges to regular order, and court decisions regarding various funding freezes. We are very very committed to doing our best to explain what is happening and what the risks and harms of these actions are already what's already happening and what could happen. And I'm sure that many of y'all who are sponsoring us are very eager to find that out and help us find that out. I should note, though, that there's I think, a inevitability thesis regarding the inexorable economic advantages that clean energy now has. I think those advantages are manifest. I do worry that the inevitability thesis is being challenged in some ways, in some profound ways, by this current administration. And we need to explore how those challenges are being met and the solutions to them. And a lot of those solutions are happening at the regional and state level. Let's be clear, there are a lot of barriers to growing the clean energy capacity we need to reach our climate goals, even before this administration took over. And that work is going to continue at the state level in utility integrated resource plans and regulatory actions and state legislation. It's going to be happening at the regional transmission organizations and independent system operators, trying to figure out how to solve our interconnection challenges and our grid expansion challenges. There's plenty of work to do. But I think I was supposed to say one thing, so I better stop.
No, that's good. And I think, we'll be coming back to, I think, the Trump administration's impact on all of our beats quite a bit throughout this call. But yeah, who wants to jump in next?
Well, I can talk a little bit. Obviously, with offshore wind, it's become a little bit of a nemesis. Trump's nemesis, much more so than I think any other renewable sector. And so obviously I'm reporting on kind of the political headwinds without being sensational. I think there's been a lot of sensational rhetoric coming from the president about offshore wind, and then like the media mimics that. It's like a mirror. And so I'm really interested in like, what are the facts? What can be done still? And not kind of ride news sentiment, kind of really understand like what can be done, what the industry is doing despite, this this administration and its limits, frankly. And also what's happening to political support, on Capitol Hill, right? So outside of the administration, what about the political support for offshore wind that was in some regards bipartisan up until the past couple of months? And then obviously the story is Europe is still, going ahead full steam on offshore wind. And so what does that say about us, and what can we learn from that? So those are some of the interesting things I'm trying to follow along on.
Yeah. Go ahead, Maria.
Yeah, and I'll just build on what Claire was saying too, and Jeff as well, in terms of the storylines, looking for how states are able to continue the programs that they, may have started before, during the Biden administration or before, how that progress continues, what that looks like, and kind of multinational companies, how they're continuing their climate efforts, because as Claire mentioned, Europe is moving ahead on offshore wind. They also have other policies around climate and decarbonization that affect international companies who are going to be juggling these things in all aspects of their businesses. So I'll really be interested in paying attention to I guess not just progress, but sort of how the effort is continuing, right, in states and at a global scale as well, because obviously the federal government is a huge actor, a huge player, but it's not the single force sort of in this energy transition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I am following and very interested in how state and local projects are hopefully moving forward to decarbonize buildings. One vein that I'm tapping is how do they decarbonize affordable housing? Because there are a lot of co-benefits, certainly to tenants, having AC access for the first time if you get heat pumps in to decarbonize the building. And there are health benefits. These systems are less costly to run, so it makes all the more sense to provide these solutions to people who need it the most. And another dimension of that I've been seeing more and more as I've been reporting in this area is the concept of hooking up decarbonized buildings that have heat pumps to networked thermal energy systems. And these are a really fascinating kind of a way of spreading heat around so you can unlock even bigger efficiencies than just decarbonizing one building at a time, or having one building just be an island of decarbonization. And so it can make it, more affordable, reduce strain on the grid. And there are states that are moving forward with legislation to allow utility companies to own these systems. So I think it's also really fascinating from the commercial or the economic viability of having these companies be able to make money in the clean energy transition, even if they've historically only been selling gas.
Yeah. Julian, how about you?
Yeah, I'll go with that Moss Landing battery fire to
Sure.
get a little far away from it's some far away from DC, but this was the largest standalone grid battery built in the U.S., the world. It's in an old power plant building on the coast of Northern California near Monterey and Santa Cruz. And so it's kind of the symbol of like this whole new clean, efficient, modern grid that California was trying to model for everybody. So there's a big problem in it. This is not the first time it caught fire, but in fact, the fourth time that complex had a battery fire. This time, though, it wasn't a small isolated thing. It kind of burned up the whole building. And in fact, our colleague Eric Westhoff lived down the street and saw these 100-foot columns of flame erupting from this thing. So it's a literally sensational event, and I think our approach is always to try to cover that accurately and without sensationalizing it. And so I was delving into the kind of this history of safety and how that's developed for the battery industry. And interestingly, this was really what you might call a pre-modern battery, even though was built 5 years ago. That was actually before the modern fire safety codes were developed. So the good news is no other battery since then is packing as many kind of battery units into a single enclosed space, which seems to have been the problem for the combustibility of it. But obviously it does create challenges for folks trying to permit and get communities to accept this technology going forward, which needs to happen to keep transitioning the grid and reducing emissions and saving people money, honestly. But now they'll have to kind of differentiate of okay, that was really bad, and here's why we're different. And there's a lot of good evidence to bring to bear, but it's a tough way to start the year for that particular industry. No one was hurt, though. I should say that no one was hurt or injured by the fire.
Okay. Obviously, one thing that kind of loomed over a few of those answers is the Trump administration, and so I think let's come back to it a little bit and talk about how it impacts the different beats in a little bit more detail. There's some questions in the chat too about the tax credits and the ITC, and we can get to that in a sec. But I mean, Claire, I'll just put you on the spot since your beat I think is the most impacted. I mean, you mentioned just wanting to try and hew a little bit closer toward the facts. And I think there's some questions in the chat too about is offshore wind completely dead, or what's the path forward? Maybe you could speak a little bit more about like what exactly we do know and what the path is forward for any projects, if there is one at all.
Right. Yeah. So my first story here at Canary a couple of weeks ago was kind of like what projects kind of are on pause and completely frozen, what can be going forward. And I urge kind of folks to go reference back to that story. But I think it's going to be, it isn't, it's not all is lost. Like, I want to just say, I was meeting with a high ranking official in the Biden administration who did permitting for offshore wind. And, she pointed to Virginia as an example of a project that's going full speed ahead. And they've put out 2 press releases that don't say Trump anywhere, but you can tell they're like, their press releases that are saying like, we did this construction thing, we got this other thing done, like we're going ahead, and so they're very much the Virginia is a place to watch for offshore wind going ahead, as well as Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And then the question is for these other states like New Jersey, which seem to be pulling back, like, can they hunker down for 4 years and then kind of come back if another administration comes in? And I posed that question to this official I was meeting with, and she said, look at Maine. Maine's a great example of, they came to the offshore wind game early, and then they had Governor LePage, which hated offshore wind, and they kind of like went away. They didn't even talk about offshore wind for 4 years, and then they recently just got a permit. They have the only permit to build floating offshore wind turbines in America right now, and they're going forward. I don't know why this is happening. This is artificial intelligence at its worst.
Yeah, it's a nice compliment.
And so, yeah, there's going to be states that pull back. There are going to states that go full speed ahead, I think, kind of almost as a form of resistance to this administration, I think. And then there are examples, I think, of states that are just going to lay low and then kind of be quiet and then see what they can do when the dust settles. And I think that's really important to report on those kind of nuances than just like all is lost. And so that's really will be my focus, I think.
Yeah, the Dominion project in Virginia is definitely very interesting. And Virginia,
very interesting. Yeah. I think anyone interested in offshore wind should be watching that closely, and I am as well.
And it's a state with a Republican governor too, which is worth noting.
Who's supportive of offshore wind. Yeah.
So we will see. Maria, I wanted to put you on the spot too about some of the Trump stuff, because I mean, to your point, there's these other levers like state policy, and obviously every other country in the world. America is not the only country, but one of the main ways that the Biden administration made progress on industrial decarbonization was through a grant program, and grants are as far as we know at this point held up by Trump's executive order from day one in the office. So maybe you can speak a little bit about some of the projects that were funded through it was an OSED program,
the Office of
and what's at stake there.
Yeah, definitely happy to. So, as Dan mentioned, the Department of Energy's Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations had a part of their work or part of their programming was this $6 billion for industrial demonstration projects that were designed to basically demonstrate first of a kind or somehow novel technology to reduce emissions in large, heavy industrial facilities like steel, aluminum, glass, pulp and paper, a lot of segments. And so we've been kind of covering that closely from when it was announced to when the projects were selected. The Biden administration did a lot in its kind of last months to sort of wrap these move these award negotiations along so that the companies, the projects would actually kind of be legally obligated. But of course, the big question now is, what does any of that mean? So in this current funding pause situation, and so that's one thing I'm trying to get more insight on now, and we'll be continuing because there.
Are we losing Maria a little bit?
Project.
Maria, I think we might have lost you, but that was a good conclusion. I think we got the picture. But I mean, one particular project Maria did some great on the ground reporting on last year that was funded through that program as a green smelter project. The location hasn't been determined just yet, but it would be the first new aluminum smelter period in the U.S. in decades. So lots at stake there. Maria, you're back. I was just talking about the green smelter project in your absence.
Am I back on? I'm sorry, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, you're good now. I think we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, old New York apartment building has its charms. Yeah, so the smelter project and a green steel project proposed in Ohio also received an award of up to 500 million. So in theory, they have the funding was awarded to begin these to begin the planning. TBD what actually happens, but yeah, that'll be really interesting to track because these are over $600 billion worth of federal cost share for these projects, in addition to what the companies are also putting up.
Yeah, and they're huge capital intensive projects that might struggle. It's challenging to finance them without the government. So
yeah, and not to belabor the point, but also they were sort of like built as this renaissance in American manufacturing, which in some ways aligns with the sort of the policy goals or the rhetoric of the Trump administration, right? Reshoring a lot of this manufacturing, but whether they'll continue that approach obviously is unclear.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about a topic that we have not reported on as much, but I think is very much on everyone's minds, which is what happens with the tax credits. A lot of our reporting has been focused on grants and loan programs under the infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, but the tax credits are obviously a really big mechanism for financing clean energy projects created or extended by the IRA. And I don't know, this is kind of open to anyone, though. Jeff, maybe you've done a good amount of reporting. Julian, maybe some recent stuff. Yeah, tax credits, especially ITC. We have a call out in the Q&A.
Well, I've been talking to a lot of people about what their vibe check is on support for retaining at least some of the ITC as it exists today. I would say that the vibes have darkened in the past 2 weeks, but the same key determinants prevail. I think we've all seen the reports about the preponderance of tax credit funded energy and infrastructure projects and manufacturing investments made in Republican states and congressional districts. That remains the case. I do see one of the questions in here asking about the fact that there aren't as many jobs yet committed based on those investments. That's also true. I was just talking to someone earlier today who said that if we could have got the IRA passed a year earlier, we'd probably have a lot more traction on that. But I do think that it's probably incumbent on everyone who's living in those districts and who has a stake in seeing the jobs growth and the revenues and the tax returns, to local communities and needs that will be provided by those investments or will not if their rationale is undermined, to be out there and making that case. I think what we're hearing from folks like Keith Martin at Norton Rose Fulbright and other experts is that we are going to see a shortening of the runway for receiving tax credits. ITC right now it's through 2032 or until we get to I forget what percentage of clean energy. Doesn't really matter anymore because that's probably going to change. It's probably going to be shortened, right? And that's going to have the usual effects. It could have the usual effects of when we shorten a runway for getting a tax credit, which means that a bunch of people are going to try to get projects stood up and get the tax credit before it expires. So that could be oddly enough, a driver of increased activity. These are open questions. I think on the manufacturing tax credit, there is, for the same reasons we're just talking about, a lot of support for that across, on a bipartisan basis, right? But I think that there's going to be quite a bit of interest, and there already is in Congress, about taking some whacks at providing manufacturing tax credits to companies that have associations with Chinese-owned firms.
Mhm.
You all have seen this reported. There are bills in Congress right now. I have no idea where they stand at present. And of course, everyone wants to talk about what is going to happen with tariffs. And don't ask me.
Yeah, well, I think anyone that pretends they have an answer is probably lying. But sorry, Jeff, to cut you off, but Julian did just publish a story today on that was related to solar manufacturing and kind of taking on this question of the manufacturing tax credit. So
yeah, I was writing an update on really how far the solar industry's come in onshoring its supply chain, and it's pretty stunning. Like, we definitely no one really thought this could happen if you go back like 5 years ago. But the Solar Energy Industries Association is counting more than 50 gigawatts of solar panel production online today in the U.S., which is more than demand. So like we could basically, in theory, produce every panel we need to install in the United States going forward. It's in reality a little more complicated because obviously there's trade and different price points and things like that. But then the question was kind of, can we go deeper into the supply chain and start making the photovoltaic cells that are like the big value adder that gets assembled into a panel? And then can you make the silicon wafers that you etch the cells into? And then can you do the silicon ingot stuff that is the precursor to that? And it's actually all starting to move in that direction. So there's cell factories coming online. But I talked with some folks who are trying to build these factories, which again, adding to American manufacturing, directly countering China's dominance in the solar supply chain as it stands today. But to finance the new factory, since there's really no existing thriving solar cell production for lenders to look at, they really like this manufacturing tax credit, 45X from the Inflation Reduction Act, and it pays out a specified dollar amount for basically every widget, every solar panel, every solar cell, any of that you produce in the year, you get a very clearly defined credit from the U.S. government, and then you can actually use that as collateral to underwrite loans to get these factories built. So seems great. It's just, if we don't know if that tax credit's going to be around, then you can't get that multi-$100 loan to build your factory that's going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in whatever local community and hire people in high-tech manufacturing jobs. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at now. Is like, in theory, it has to be an act of Congress to undo that. But now we also have to caveat, like, in a world where laws are obeyed, it has to be an act of Congress. But there's, changing landscape of sort of what the executive branch thinks it can do relative to the constitutional power of the purse there. But then even if, Congress were to try to revise it, the margins are extremely thin. There's, about 14 or so Republicans in Congress who've publicly said they support these tax credits because of the job impacts, and they don't want a full repeal of that. So, to do it legislatively, it's very much a open question if they could pull that off. I think the question is like, if Trump thought this was a big priority and started targeting people individually and saying, no, you need to undo these tax credits, would they stand by their letter? Maybe not. But like, of all the priorities out there, I don't know how high up the, dismantling manufacturing tax credits that counteract China is going to be in the other priorities going forward.
Let me just say 45X is also something that touches the offshore wind community too, with wind turbine manufacturing. And I reported how there have been Republicans on the Hill who are advocating for 45X, for both solar panels and for turbines. And so this is something that, that Republicans really care about, this 45X. So it's be interesting to see what's going to happen with it, this tax credit.
Yeah. And then pivoting from that one, Allison, I wanted to just see if you had anything you wanted to share from the perspective of kind of home electrification, given the huge rebate and tax credit programs in IRA. Just what have you been hearing there?
Yeah, well, for tax credits, the advice I've heard is file your taxes sooner than later if you have done a clean energy project in your home, because although it would be unprecedented for those tax credits not to be honored, this is a crazy time that we're living in. If those tax credits were repealed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's on the tax credit front. Then for the home energy rebates, there's an $8.8 billion program that focuses on decarbonizing homes. States have, many states, kind of finalize their award negotiations with Department of Energy. But I think the rebates are a bit in question. So like whether those are going to continue to flow in the states that administer these rebates. And these rebates, they're for heat pumps and upgrading electrical panels and all sorts of stuff. So one source said that they've been contacting the state energy office about these rebates because it impacts their business, which is home decarbonization. And the energy office has been tight-lipped about it. So this company is concerned that they're not going, like their customers are not going to invest in these projects because of the delay. And so one area that I'm interested in reporting and digging into more is like, what are the cases where electrification just has overwhelming benefits and is more affordable? Are startups succeeding in making these retrofits more affordable, either by being one-stop shops as general contractors to simplify and streamline the process, or perhaps by using software so that designing a heat pump system is much easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I think we've covered our bases on Trump. Obviously, this could be an entire webinar on the Trump administration and clean energy, but I think we'll try to keep it from being that. And I'm going to pivot real quick to a question that we got that I appreciated. This was not in the Q&A now, but ahead of the webinar, which was, every industry that we cover is facing this big threat from the federal government. So how in these times are we attempting to find positive stories about how the energy transition is progressing? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on that and how you're looking for kind of those data points that say, still going on, still making progress.
I'll start by kind of flipping it. I am reaching out and talking to people about the good work that is being done and will continue to be done through programs that have federal funding, if only the federal funding isn't blocked off. I think it's really important to reiterate and to let people speak in their own words about the kind of economic prosperity and the enhanced status of U.S. competitiveness in international markets, as well as kind of international climate action that can come and will continue to come from simply honoring federal government's commitments to spending this money that has been appropriated by Congress. But there's a ton of action going on at the state level, and I dare say at the local level. I mean, I just got a a message from someone who's worked with a low-income multifamily apartment complex down on the in the San Mateo County, kind of like east of the 101 freeway, if you all know where that is, that has conducted the first kind of whole multifamily heating electrification project that they know of in this state. I'll have to go check around to see what we're talking about. And I'm sure we've got some, resistance heating, but, full heat pump mods. This is doable. It costs more than what you would do otherwise, but it's going to save you over the long run. There are lots of examples of this, just the sheer efficiency of electric appliances, electrification of things that we burn stuff to do today are just really clear. They're also such an important hedge against risk and volatility of pricing of what are essentially kind of globally traded fossil commodity products. We're looking for folks who can talk about what they have done in their schools. I know that we've got someone from Generation 180 in here on the call, so I wanted to give a shout out to you guys and let you know that we want to hear about how schools are lowering their energy bills and moving money into being able to hire more teachers and provide more services to their students and get their kids to and from school in buses that don't have that kind of unpleasant odor. I remember experiencing riding around in a diesel bus that I guess were kind of slowly killing at least a few of my brain cells every time I hopped on there. We need this stuff to be communicated loudly and persistently, and it's not a partisan thing. So this is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, the story, at least for my sector, offshore wind, is not just the story of like the turbines in the ocean, but it's the whole supply chain that feeds that. And there are plenty of examples of factories in the United States that a lot of them have owners, multinational companies own them that are European, that they come here not because Biden is the president. They come here because, especially in the Southeast, land is cheap and labor is cheap. And they're going to continue making underwater, like there's a underwater offshore cable factory near Charleston, South Carolina, where I used to be. And someone asked the director of the North America operations, like, what are you going to do with Trump? And they were like, well, we're just going to continue to serve the European market, but while also providing good jobs here in South Carolina. And so I think like those are kind of hope stories of the way like the supply chain that has been onshored here, like it's not going to all go away. Yes, there's a story about how much it could, but it's not all going to go away. And I think that's like a bright, a kind of solutions oriented story or a more positive story. And then the other thing, in the offshore wind sector is I think there's a lot of focus on, certain groups that are against offshore wind, like let's say fishermen, right? Yeah, a lot of them are because it's a big change and change is scary. But, I've been talking to a group of fishermen that, they've got boats, offshore wind, the offshore wind projects that are being built. There's 5 of them right now, right? They need boats. And so like fishermen in the off season up in New England, they are getting extra supplemental income by serving and working with the offshore wind community. That's a great thing for those, for that population. And so like, there's really kind of small stories here and there to really focus on like kind of what's positive, like what positive things are still moving forward. And I like focusing on those just as much as the depressing stuff.
Balance.
And I could jump in with, we just spent a week in Texas doing some Canary Live events in Austin and Houston. And it's really the heart of American clean energy right now. If we're going off just sheer numbers, they're installing more solar than California is. They were already like so far ahead of anyone on wind. And now batteries, depending on whose data set you're looking at, Texas is installing more grid batteries than California and therefore any other state. And, if you look at kind of like what the New England ISO grid is doing at a given moment in time, or New York, and how much renewables are meeting their demand, it's absurdly low. So the places that have been touting their ambitious climate goals for years and years have a lot less to show for it than Texas does without any particular climate goals. And so I'm interested in that. Like, I think it kind of confounds expectations on both the left and the right of like what you would expect from Texas, or what conditions give rise to successful clean energy deployment. And I'm definitely going to be thinking a lot about sort of what that market means as a sort of bastion of clean energy success during a Trump era, and what lessons can be pulled out and extrapolated to other places.
Yeah, and I've always been really fascinated by sort of in the emerging clean tech, clean energy space, the the ideas and the solutions that startups and researchers have come up with, and certainly not to overstate sort of the impact they might have, but I think that that research, that curiosity and passion that these companies have, will it's continuing. And I was just thinking, I know Julian and some other colleagues in Texas got to see like a live demonstration of new geothermal drilling technology. So the real projects are still happening, and so I'm going to be continuing to write about those, and I'll be interested to hear about sort of these. Even if it's early stage research, it might be commercial stage demonstrations coming online. That there's actually a lot of solutions that are coming forward, and these companies have been working on them for years, and I don't see them. I mean, certainly they'll face challenges, but I don't see them grinding to a halt, this year.
Yeah. And at least in the case of geothermal, and at least based on what the new energy secretary says, although we'll see what is actually done. Apparently, Chris Wright likes geothermal energy. So
right, yeah, he's an investor in Fervo, which is kind of the leading next gen geothermal company, I suppose, in the country.
Yeah. And if I could just say a quick word on that demo that Maria mentioned. So that's a company called Quaise, and I think Maria had covered them. They've been trying to develop like super deep geothermal technology. So if you can go deeper into the earth than, so deep, it's so hot that it melts a conventional drill. It's really hot down there, and you can get like more consistent kind of clean energy around the clock. So they've taken a sort of microwave beam that was developed for the nuclear fusion industry and attached that to a conventional drilling rig, and it like liquefies rock. So it just like melts rock by blasting it with these particular kinds of energy waves.
creating
It creates this kind of like backsplash of, it looks like obsidian. Yeah, it's like real shiny black, like volcanic obsidian essentially, and it smells toasty. It's like toasted rock smell.
Yeah. Cool. Allison, anything you want to add just on the question of finding positive stories at the moment?
Yeah, I'm on the lookout for stories that of projects that are moving forward regardless of federal funding, or that we're not dependent on federal funding. States and utilities are still pursuing these projects. There's one startup that I've covered, Zero Homes. They work with a kind of a group of rural electric co-ops, or well, how do I say it? Yes, they're partnering with different rural electric co-ops in Colorado, and so they serve their customers. They'll go to their customers' homes and retrofit their homes. And when I spoke with Zero Homes recently, they said that so far those projects are still moving forward. Like the utilities that they're working with are still confident about those. So that's really encouraging.
Yeah. I mean, I think as a rule, organizationally, we've been moving in the direction of more state and regional coverage anyway, and obviously the merger with ENN solidifies that further. And I think the many of the positive stories we'll be able to tell will probably manifest in those state and local arenas. And there was a story that we published. Kathy Kowalski, who's a reporter for Canary and by way of ENN, wrote a story this week about how the Ohio Chamber of Commerce was kind of coming out strongly in support of solar projects in Ohio, and there's been a lot of kind of acrimony, I think, between farmers and kind of land use disputes about solar in Ohio. And this was kind of like a kind of Republican coded, very businessy group coming out in strong support of solar. And it's one small thing in one state, right? But finding those little moments where maybe the needle is being tipped a bit in the direction of clean energy will, I think, be a focus for us. And we are better positioned to do it than ever with our new merger with Energy News Network. Okay, we've got about 9 minutes left. I wanted to do like a quick kind of lightning round, just like short answers to some questions to close us out. And I'll start with the first one, which, let's keep these ones real quick, just kind of like say the answer and a little bit of justification. But yeah, what's the most interesting company or project on your beat right now? And if someone's got an answer, they can jump in. Otherwise, I'm going to call.
For me, it's Vineyard Wind. It was supposed to be the very first offshore wind, commercial scale offshore wind project upbringing in America. Trump slow rolled it during his first administration, and then a blade fell off last summer, and that became a whole debacle. But like the mayor of New Bedford just sent me an email that they're going forward. Like this is the wind project that refuses to die, and I think that's really interesting. It shows a model for perseverance within the industry, and so that's what I'm watching.
And when is that supposed to be done?
The end of 2026.
Okay.
Yeah, fully done, but it'll probably start feeding the grid within the year. So
yeah, cool. Who's next? Allison, you got one?
Yeah. I mean, it's companies that can make retrofitting buildings more affordable. So potentially using software to do that. I will say that.
Yeah. Julian, tell us about a cool battery project.
Yeah, well, this year's supposed to be the year that Form Energy installs its first grid scale long duration battery. That they're the ones using iron and sort of the rust, the energy that's released in running the rust reaction back and forth on demand. So they're putting that into Minnesota, and it's like where lithium battery typically can go full out discharging to the grid for 4 hours. These ones can do it for like 100 hours or more. So if that, does what it's supposed to do, that's a really big deal in terms of, how do we take solar and turn it into around the clock intermittent, go from intermittent to firm and reliable and on demand. And, that, yeah, we got to see. But they've got a great factory that's up and running in an old steel town in West Virginia, and they're like ready to go if everything kind of works the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. Jeff, are there any cool grid projects we should know about? How about that? I'm going to narrow down your very big beat.
Thanks. I've got a boring one and a more exciting one. Boring one first. Grid Unity. Hopefully their DOE grant is going through. They basically do workflow management for the grid operators that gotta handle interconnection. Just think about if you had to handle gigawatts of interconnection requests via spreadsheets and emails, and replace that with a proper modern workflow management system. Boring, incredibly powerfully, potentially powerfully useful in getting more stuff interconnected faster by cutting down the time you spend losing stuff and trying to figure out who changed the spreadsheet last. So that's important. And then one coming at John Farrell. It's a John Farrell special because I see your question here, John. Distributed capacity procurements. We're talking about virtual power plants a lot. They are incredibly powerful. What combination of ownership models do we need to look at to get everyone's distributed solar and batteries and flexible EV charging and smart thermostats and grid responsive water heaters and stuff like that to lower the cost of delivering electricity to people, so that the more electricity we need, the cheaper it gets, because the more we start using electricity instead of something else, the broader the costs of maintaining the grid are spread across everyone who's buying electricity. That's really important. Is there a role for utilities to play in doing some of that distributed energy and distributed virtual power plant stuff? Should it be third parties? How are we going to balance who's paying for what and what the returns are? These are fascinating stories, and they're going to be happening at the state level. So we'll be having to keep an eye on a lot of them.
Yeah. All right, Maria, what project are you most interested in at the moment?
Well,
Or company?
Just to narrow it down to kind of one subsector of industrial.
We're losing you again, Maria. Cliffhanger.
Project and H2 Green Steel. So move forward and overcome the hurdles that have been set. That'll be cool.
Sorry, Maria, we lost you. We lost you there. We heard H2 Green Steel, which that's the one in Sweden. Is that right? Or am I confusing that with a different project? Yeah. Jeff, do you know, is that the Sweden green steel plant, or is that hybrid? That's a different one. Can you guys hear me?
I'm trying to Google it right now.
No, it's fine. I thought you might know. Maria, you cut out again, unfortunately. We heard H2 green steel, and I was trying to remember if my hazy memory on it was right or not. Is that the Sweden one or no?
Yeah, I'm sorry for my internet connection.
Okay.
But yes, in short, green steel projects using hydrogen in Sweden.
Thank you. Boiling it down. Okay, cool. We've got a couple minutes left. One last quick question, which I think is a fun one, which was just, let's get a book recommendation from all of you. Or if you haven't read any good books recently, or you haven't been reading too much, whatever, it could be podcast, some other media. Jeff's maybe pulling a book off his bookshelf right now. Yeah, what do we got?
I recently read The Man Who Could Move Clouds, which is a memoir by a journalist and writer in Colombia. It was really fascinating.
What's the name of the author? Do you remember?
First name is Ingrid Rojas. I forget her third last name.
That's enough. That's enough for a Google search.
Yeah.
We can get there. Cool. Jeff, what'd you just grab off your shelf there?
Oh yeah, this is my sister gave it to me because she knew I needed cheering up. What if we get it right by this author, who I don't know, but I bet Claire you might know her because she's in ocean science.
Yeah.
I've been reading it to try to go to
Yeah,
sleep.
it's really good. I don't know her person. I've met her once or twice, but
Nice.
I also like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking and inspiring by turns, depending on how I feel late at night when I'm trying to fall asleep. I cannot recommend it highly enough.
Cool. I just finished Cobalt Red, which is about critical minerals in the DRC and kind of the ethical dilemma we're in there. Finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. I highly recommend it. I recently turned back to this book by Naomi Oreskes. She wrote the Merchants of Doubt. Remember, so she also wrote this lesser known book called Why Trust Science. And it's a bunch of essays of like why you should trust scientists. And I reread it recently in like in the wake of Trump, and it's great. And I highly recommend it. It gives me hope for things. So.
Yeah. Allison, Julian, anything you guys want to add?
Yeah, because it's. I read a space opera series recently.
Nice.
Yeah, by Anne Leckie. The first book is called Ancillary Justice, and it is about a ship AI that is reduced to a single person, and this person is hell-bent on getting revenge on the emperor of the empire that she served because they made her do something. She followed a command that she really regrets.
Interesting.
So it's just, I mean, it was very moving and funny. So
Yeah.
yeah, I highly recommend it.
And space operas are usually like thousands of pages too, right? That's like you can barely. It was like a super long one.
No, it wasn't super long. It
I
was
just like when I hear opera, I'm like, these are like these sprawling stories.
right. I mean, part of it was just reimagining a very different society. So in the main character's culture, although she gets to meet many other cultures from different worlds, they don't emphasize gender, and so you don't know like who's gender, and then the default pronoun for the book is she, so
Okay.
everyone is is like that's in their language, they just kind of
Yeah.
I mean, you have to pick one.
Which is a whole other topic of the Trump administration, say for
Right.
another webinar.
Right. All right, Julian, you got one to close us out?
Yeah, mine's space related too, but I just finished Orbital, which won
I
the
love
Booker Prize last year, and it's
Mhm.
short. It's like
Yes.
200 pages.
It's good.
And not a lot of the Booker Prize winners are 200 pages. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, it feels like science fiction, but it's actually very present day about the astronauts in the International Space Station going through one 24-hour span, which for them is like they're just whipping around the Earth at crazy miles per hour and seeing sunrise and set many times in the course of their day and looking back at Earth. And so it's very meditative, and it's not, I mean, it's sort of about climate change too.
It is, yeah.
Technology and kind of relationship to the Earth and ways of seeing, and
That's great.
very, very beautiful.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. We went 2 minutes over because we like talking about books. Go figure. A bunch of writers, nerds. But that's what we do here at Canary Media. We write and we'd like to read. And thank you all for joining us. Hopefully this has been enjoyable and not too down or too Trump focused webinar. And thank you so much for your support and for reading us and for donating. And yeah. Until the next donor webinar.
Yeah,
Take
thanks
care.
everybody.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks all.